Me and Jane are both finance liaison officers with the British Museum's Portland Antiquities scheme. Jane worked with me in Kent before working in Sussex and was instrumental in kind of updating our ceramics records from the Medway estuary. As I'm going to say something blasphemous, I've never been a huge ceramics fan of any period. Partially due to having to excavate through a collapsed salmon warehouse in February on the Thames riverside, which didn't endear it to me. However, its material from the Medway has really, and particularly the Upchurch Ceramics, has really provided an interesting way back into ceramics for me, as it's proving a challenge to examine and record from our PAS work. So just a quick rundown of what the PAS is for those not in the know. It's a recording scheme to record archaeological finds made by members of the public across England and Wales. It is run by a network of finds liaison officers like myself and Jane, but headquartered at the British Museum with the treasure team. Now, mostly, so we have a huge amount of data on the PAS database, as it is started out in Kent at least since the 1997. And now initially it was set out with the aim of working with metal detectorists, but over the years it really has expanded with fossil hunters, field walkers, and the particular relevant one here, mudlarks, particularly in the last 10 years. And when it comes to the mudlarks, in the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen an exponential increase in the amount of material collected from people from riverine and estuary locations. Often this is London, which is kind of where the hobby started, but we're seeing more and more of this on the Medway. Now, for those of you again that don't know, the Medway is probably Kent's major river, and it has a large estuary and marsh area which comes out of Rochester and Chatham, which is here, and then feeds into the Thames estuary. And is bordered on the right by the Isle of Sheppey and on the west by the Hoop Peninsula and the Isle of Grain. Now, the Medway is effectively, like the Thames, one massive archaeological site. This is a view of everything that the Kent HER has listed for the area, and this includes obviously the wrecks that we can see there with the nice little ships, sites, scheduled ancient monuments, single finds, historical, which were made before the PAS. The PAS's data is not, however, on here visible like this because there's a different layer which we don't usually tend to send to people. Okay. And so, yeah, so there's a lot of archaeological work that's gone on here and a lot of recording of material. Now, some quick background work. Obviously, there's been a lot of interest in the Medway estuary archaeologically, and not just from the Roman period. Obviously, we've got activity going on from prehistory, and then obviously there's famous military activity from the 17th century. But we do see in the 19th century real interest in the Roman material, notably work on kilns and cremation burials by the Vicar of Upchurch, John Woodruff, and the more recent work done by Jason Monaghan in the 80s, which culminated in the Upchurch and Thames sites Roman Pottery publication, but there is other publications around this published with Kent Archaeology Society. There is continued work by the Upchurch Archaeological research group, who produced some reports on emergency excavation there in the Gazetteer of Sites, which I would recommend if you can get hold of to go and have a look at if you're interested. And I think we have a few members of that group with us today, so hopefully I won't say anything that steps on any toes. And all of this, when it comes to the PAS side of things, is this, which is a scouring of material, very similar locations to those on the HER. Now, sorry, there's the map. So this is taken directly from the PAS, and obviously we can't directly select the Medway estuary itself. So we've got a few of the coastal finds and near coastal finds from the area, which Jane will talk at in more depth. But just to give some summaries, we've got around 300 objects recorded on the database. More than half are non-metallic finds, and the majority of which are ceramics. So mostly Iron Age and Roman, although as we may see, I think from later on, there is some later material starting to show up as well. So I'm going to hand over to Jane now, who has recorded a video for us to listen and recorded her section of the presentation, where she'll talk about some of the material that has been recorded with the PAS.
Hi, thanks, Joe. So the next slides offer an overview of the material recorded so far on the PAS, and most records and images have been provided by public recorders who have used Monaghan's typology. Yes. The map on the far right with the blue and yellow clusters illustrates the area of study with 4 main assemblages. Firstly, the small blue cluster of 3 records at Bishopness Island is highlighted in the central map. At point A, we have the rim and handle of an amphora illustrated at the bottom, possibly a Gauloise form dating to the 1st to mid-3rd centuries. And at point B, 2 vessels on the left, they've been reconstructed by the finder. Both are local Upchurch Wares vessels with parallels in Monaghan and date to the 1st to mid-2nd century. The next assemblage marked in yellow with 66 on the map on the left. This is the largest assemblage. The central map details the area with most of the finds. 64 vessel fragments were found by 1 finder at area B. Much of this material is unidentified and consists of rim and body sherds rather than complete vessels, which I will summarise in the next slide. Also found in area B was the rim and neck of a single-handed glass flagon dating to the 1st to 2nd century. We do have some other isolated finds. On the top right, we've got a rather nice local ware oxidised poppy-headed beaker. This was found at area C. To the left, the London record has been identified as Central Gaulish ware Dragon Door 37 decorated bowl, and that was found at D. And the Kent record at the bottom, the 2 co-joining fragments of another Dragon Door 37 bowl was found at area A. So in summary of the 64 vessel sherds recorded at area B, the great majority were sandy, oxidised and grey wares, followed by Samian, BB2 wares, local grog and limestone tempered fabrics, and a couple of British fineware examples. With regard to forms, most of them were unidentified. Of those that were identified, jars dominated, followed by bowls, flagons, cups, dishes and beakers, with 2 mortaria and 1 possible modified sherd. So some objects of particular interest from this assemblage. At the bottom is one of the mortaria. This has been recorded as Oxfordshire whiteware, dated at 250 to 400 AD. Monaghan notes that late Roman pottery is noticeably absent. He suggests this probably confirms a general rise in water levels in the late 2nd or early 3rd centuries. So this mortaria is notable as it is quite late in date. In the centre, we have the rim and neck of an oxidised flagon with a distinctive stone stopper. To the right, a rim sherd of a carinated vessel. This has been recorded as New Forest slipware. And finally, on the top left is the possibly modified Pierce vessel base. So moving now to the southeastern area represented in the top left map with the remaining clusters marked 8 and 18. This is the most interesting area. It focuses on the true area of Upchurch production, illustrated by the map of recorded kiln sites on the left. These assemblages are generally complete vessels with some interesting associated finds, and I've split these into groups A to E. In regard to associated kilns with these groups, there's 1 recorded at group A, a concentration of 4 kilns at area B, and a couple more at D. So starting with A, we have 5 local ware vessels. On the left are 2 miniatures. Monaghan divides them into coarse and fine fabrics and notes that they're often one-off vessels. These two vessels are crude jar and bowl imitations dating to the 1st century. Then we've got a fine carinated beaker, which is recorded as Upchurch Ware, or possibly a Gallo-Belgic import of the 1st to 2nd century. The dog dish bowl is in a local sandy fabric, and the complete wide mouth bowl is flint tempered, dates to the 1st century. Monaghan notes that there is a strong evidence for the pre-conquest manufacture of flint tempered pottery, of which this seems to be a possible example. So at Area B, this is the largest assemblage of complete vessels. This is the Slay Hills and Milford Creek area, and is also in association with some interesting historic records as well, of 2 hoards. One was a Cistercius hoard found in 1952 of 37 coins dating to 180 AD. A second hoard was found in 1864 containing 14 denarii, a silver armilla and 2 silver finger rings with intaglios of red carnelian. The ceramics we have on the records comprise of 13 vessels. 8 of them are complete. At the top, we've got 3 more miniatures, which, like the previous examples, appear to be crudely made and hand formed. We have a vessel here with the remains of a stick handle. There is a similar form in Monaghan's catalogue, but without a handle, that dates to 40 to 70 AD and is noted as unique. The miniature carinated beaker is an imitation of the fineware form, similar to the earlier Upchurch example in Group A. This miniature form is published in Monaghan, but as wheel thrown or wheel turned in fine fabrics. So unusually, this example is handmade and of a coarse fabric. Other finds on the right, an indented or folded beaker, recorded as local Upchurch Ware. And then we saw from the map of the kilns that there were 4 kiln sites in the immediate vicinity. The 2 lower images reflect this production with 6 cigar-shaped kiln bars, and then this carinated net bowl with spalling is one of 3 recorded wasters from the area. So moving across the estuary to the Upchurch Peninsula at sea, we have 1 ceramic find from here. A large wide mouth local ware storage jar. It's wheel turned. Monaghan dates it to 50 to 70 AD. There were some other finds in the area, a blue and white tesserae, and an as ordipondius of uncertain ruler. So moving back to Group D on the right, we have 5 ceramic records from this group. We've got a rouletted poppy-headed beaker, a small finely made net storage jar with cordons. There were 2 stamped Samian bases, and then we have this whiteware lamp, more of which will be discussed later by Joe. And finally, at the bottom, we've got Group E at Lower Halstow. We have no ceramics recorded from here, but there is evidence of a local villa with box flue tile. Non-ceramic finds include a 3rd century radiate of Victorinus at the top and a rare Republican coin dating to 217 to 215 BC. There's a bit of an issue regarding this. The land from the find spot for the Republican coin was formed from material cleared from London after the Great Fire of 1666. It's therefore unclear whether this is a genuine ancient loss or was redeposited alongside other material from London. It could even possibly be a more recent antiquarian loss. So that covers the material we have already recorded on the database, and I will now pass you back to Joe to discuss some of the new material that has been reported to him over recent months. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, so that is a really interesting look at some of that material, and it's actually one of the things I think that's quite striking is how many complete or vessels that are coming out from the area, which one has to question a little bit whether or not they are coming from the kiln sites, which I think a lot of interpretation with some of these in the past has been. Although obviously with as far back as the 19th century, we've been seeing burials and similar come out Now, one of the things that is also notable is there's a huge amount of this material that is in the hands of finders that hasn't been recorded yet. So this is one selection of one guy's day out. And similarly, you know, they're finding these on a fairly regular basis. And just also for some people that are worried that they are really digging into the sites, which in most of the cases, the guys that are recording with us regularly are not doing. There is some questions about disturbing of sites by other people, which I'll get to in a second. But literally walking along these areas, you're seeing just ceramics just lying in the mud or in eroding areas, which in some ways it always puts me in mind of the areas of the Sahara where you've just got ceramics lying on the topsoil or on the sand. But yeah, these large group of materials really represent a significant challenge for us because the PAS usually works on single object records, although we do bulk records because we have to deal with hoards and the like. So this, you know, kind of bulk records is something we do think about and we do. So far, we've been really focusing on the clearly defined complete vessels, near complete vessels, and really significantly diagnostic stuff. So with the Samian and that kind of thing. Although obviously, as with all PAS work, there's a certain level of triaging going on in terms of both maximum object recording and working relationships with the finder. So if you've got a new finder in and they've got a handful of sherds, you may record them even in other circumstances you may not. So there is a certain bias that gets put into the recording. So we're also passing on the large assemblages that we can't deal with in terms of just a dot on the map to the Kent Historic Environment Record or the HER, although really this is in long-term ceramics analysis isn't really satisfactory. So yeah, we really need to have to think about how we manage that. However, it's really going beyond this because there's a huge amount of recovery of this material going on, which is kind of being boosted by the online social media groups that are interested in mudlarking and users taking hovercrafts out to the more inaccessible areas, which is putting real pressure on the sites themselves. Not only that, is there's other ecological and archaeological sites out there. So we have hovercrafters disturbing Dead Man's Island, which is a known burial ground, and also disturbing rare birds, which has very much perturbed the RSPB and local landowners, and working with landowners on trying to mitigate the loss of data from erosion and various other things. We need to try and keep them on site. This is really not good. The other thing that we noticed is this whiteware lamp. So I was quite excited when I first saw this, but straight away after looking at it in more detail, well, not opening the record there, because this was recorded by one of my self-recorders, it didn't look right. Now, again, I don't know ceramics that well, and I really don't know Roman lamps that well, but after discussing it with notables such as Mike Marshall and Hella Eckhart at the University of Reading, and then also doing some digging into the Antiquities trade, this is a fake. This is a modern fake lamp. So we have how it ended up, particularly where we'd expect Roman finds to be, leads to real questions about the kind of integrity of the archaeological record from the area. It might be this is just a genuine loss. It might have something to do with the antiquarians researching the area, which I don't know if anyone's ever read Mortimer Wheeler's excavation diary for Maiden Castle, but some of the early archaeologists are leaving weird stuff at sites. It might be that. Alternatively, we cannot discount the thing that someone's trying to give this object artificial provenance and trying to kind of launder it through the PAS, and that obviously has real concerns about the integrity of the assemblage. This all exacerbates the risks that these sites are under and these assemblages are under because they are in the Medway estuary. It's being heavily eroded by sea level rise in general. Erosion patterns, not to mention shipping lanes and dredging for some of the things along the center of the estuary, and this might increase with attempts to increase the amount of shipping into the estuary with Brexit related adaptations. I thought after looking at those risks, having a quick like 2 slides and then over discussion about how this has been managed in the past. Now, currently the things are around community recording with the Upchurch Archaeological Research Group, Unfortunately, citizens projects finish at the mouth of the Tend and then start east of Sheppey, so we don't have the kind of coastal recording guys involved. Engagement education, particularly of the hovercraft guys and the mudlarks, to try and get them to record, but obviously this goes hand in hand with making sure landowners are aware of what's going on, and the major landowner, although not always the management, is Peel's Ports in the area, who are the kind of port authority, and we're working with them and the Medway and Swale Environmental Partnership to try and mitigate some of this, particularly with the hovercrafters, with the code of conduct and similar. Some sites are scheduled. These tend to be later military sites or parts of these historic dockyards to the southwest of the area we looked at. And obviously there's development archaeology ahead of construction, which we might see regarding the ports, further port development, or even dredging. Going forward, obviously we might need to think about scheduling, but obviously Historic England or English Historic England are moving away from this unless it's really a last resort. Wider, more in-depth surveys. So I think the estuary as a whole really does need this, and as a significant part of that, reassessing the kiln sites, reassessing the collections, because there are several large private collections out there as well, a bit like the original Winrough collection of the Upchurch Ceramics. Pushing engagement again, particularly with the mudlarks, and this can be done with the environmental guys, because the RSPB are really worried about tern populations in the area, which were disrupted by the hovercraft guys going out looking for Roman pots. And possibly even local legislation, but it's really difficult to get most of these off the ground, particularly in this situation as interested, passing interest people like myself. So really uncertain how much of this, if anything, can really be implemented. So that's it. Thank you for listening. I do apologize for a slight snafu at the beginning. I think questions are welcome if there's time, but I think Jane might have one follow-up addendum point that she wishes to say.
Yeah, it was just flagging up something that's actually been brought up in the chat, which was about that potential feeding cup. We don't actually get a chance to have a look at a lot of the objects. They're recorded by self-recorders, so we're relying on the photographs that they provide, and often you know, the fabric descriptions that they describe. But it did look like there was a tiny perforation in the vessel, but it was so small that I actually thought it was probably a void. But it looks like now that with Kate's presentation earlier, that maybe it actually is a vessel, because she did mention that some of the perforations were incredibly small. So that was something that's sort of been flagged up really today with regards to that particular example. I'm
just trying to get it up, but the video is too powerful for the stream. There it is. One on top left there, I believe.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I'm afraid that I couldn't help Jane with that one, as I couldn't remember which ones I'd seen of this assemblage, although I think I had seen that one and there was a perforation through it, but yeah, it was a difficult one.
Yeah, I mean, it is really, really tiny. So but it's on the database, and there is a high resolution image of the of it. So yeah.
That's one thing that's worth highlighting as well. These are all publicly accessible database entries, and all of the ceramics from the Medway is visible, although obviously the find spots won't be as visible as we've shown them here.